As many of you know, the systematic automatic response to the Mike Brown, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, John Crawford, Denzel Cornell, and so many other cases. Their response, their systematic automatic remote controlled response, is to say that it's not a black thing, it's an American thing. And that violence is not the answer. Well, before we go any further, I want to share with you the fact that there's some math that needs to take place, and that with all the educated black and white people in America, nobody seems to want to do the math. Well, this statistic that I didn't make up, and no other freedom fighter has made up, says that every 28 hours in the United States, a black person is killed by white supremacy law enforcement officers. This is a fact that we can't get around. So with all of our educated people, I'm very surprised. Actually, I'm not surprised, because I know how the United States works and I know how agents of white supremacy work. But with all of our educated folks, you don't hear them breaking down the math and how the math actually adds up. So we're going to do it for you this morning. All right? Because some of us are just plain street scholars. I don't mind that. I'll be a street scholar. So every 28 hours, a black person is killed by white supremacy law enforcement officers. At that rate, over 312 black people are killed by white supremacy law enforcement officers every year. Well, since 9/11, 11 years ago, 1,400 black people, but as you say, American citizens, that have been killed by law enforcement. Now let me throw this other number at you. They say approximately 400 American citizens are killed by law enforcement every year. But 312 of that number are black people. But it's not a black thing. It's an American thing. So if it's an American thing, we need to help you think this morning. Because most Americans are trained not to think, only to regurgitate what's been force-fed them. And you've been force-fed the lie that it's not a black thing, it's an American thing, and that violence is not the answer. But for sake of argument, we're going to say, you're right. It's not a black thing, it's an American thing. So the question that you have to ask yourself is, how does America settle its threatening situations? And if you could tell us that America responds to violent, threatening situation non-violently in Panama. They settled their problem in Somalia non-violently. They settled the problem they were having with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. non-violently. Malcolm X non-violently. Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad non-violently. Patrice Lumumba non-violently. Then I'll say you're right. Violence is not the answer. But if you find in your studies, if you figure out how America has settled her threatening situations and violence against her, then perhaps as a good American citizen, you should at least consider asking her to respond to the violence that's taking place against not black people, but American people. Just wanted to give you something to think about. This has been Daku Akabo Wa Akatu.